Hello again, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Fantasy Slant, powered by Pro Football Focus and brought to you by DraftKings. I am your usual host, Michael Moore, along with my usual co-host, Russell Clay. Say hello, Russell.
Welcome, everyone.
So Russ, we'll do our usual news and notes section, which essentially just turns into like a fantasy obituary for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because it seems like there's some catastrophic injury every week, which this week it was Jamaal Charles. So we'll get to that, I'm sure. But, sort of along those injury lines, we have some guys that have done quite well filling in for some injured players. Guys like Thomas Rawls, guys like Gary Barnidge, for some reason, that we'll cover a little later in the show. And then maybe do a couple of buy low, sell high candidates. With every week, the trade deadline in everyone's league gets a little closer. So you're going to want to pay more attention to that. And then we will round it out with our usual DraftKings value plays, which me and Russ talked before the show last week paid off for you people quite well. So you're all welcome, and we'll try to do it again. But let's get started, Russ. Obviously, the big news, Jamaal Charles tore his ACL again. I don't want to say it's not surprising, because it is kind of surprising. He's torn it before, so it's not a complete shock, but still devastating nonetheless. Obviously out for the year. He was having a good little season. I mean, he was doing his normal thing. He was, I think we can agree, the focal point of that offense. So in steps Knile Davis, who went on relief for Jamaal Charles in the past, did okay. But you've also got undrafted free agent rookie Charcandrick West, which I had to
Chick-fil-A West.
Yeah, that's probably easier. But undrafted rookie, immediately shot up the depth chart and suddenly finds himself in a very important role in this Chiefs offense. Now, the Chiefs overall have not put a good season together, but again, that could be more reason that they put West and Davis out there and just see what sticks. So let's get started, Russ. What do you see out of that backfield fantasy-wise? Who do you see getting the majority of the carries? Or maybe, it's a split carry thing. What are you seeing?
On a different offense, I would probably be looking at this a little differently. You'd think they would pass more, but I don't necessarily think that's going to happen. Maybe the short passing game happens a little more, but I think Andy Reid has shown he likes to run the ball, and Alex Smith is short passes and screens. That's the type of player he is. So, West is definitely an add. I'm intrigued. I still like Knile Davis a little bit. I know things haven't gone well, but he's worth a fly or two, maybe in a dynasty league. Sort of buying him if you're a Charles owner or something. But I don't know. I'm not too optimistic about any of this right now. I think DeAnthony Thomas is someone that nobody is looking at that might have a chance to emerge as a receiver, like sort of a running back receiver type third down-ish player. Because, that's a lot of touches that are just gone now.
Right. And to your point, just real quick, Jamaal Charles so far through 5 games, 21 catches for 177 yards.
Yeah, so that's the big role that's going to be filled here. I don't necessarily think the running is going to be the big thing here, Yeah,
look, Jamaal Charles was a miracle worker doing what he did behind that line. By comparison, Knile Davis so far, 2.5 yards per carry. So to your point, not too terribly optimistic on that front. From the sounds of it, at least early on, Russ, you've got Knile Davis that I think they envision as sort of, if you can call it the between the tackles runner, maybe the first and second down guy. But like you said, there's a lot of touches to go around in that offense at the running back position. And I think West could make up some of that. Right. Look, nobody is calling him Jamaal Charles by any means, but look, somebody's got to fill that role in that offense because they've already carved that out. So to me, I'm taking West over Davis the rest of the season, especially in PPR because, look, we know what we got in Knile Davis. He is what he is. At least with West, you've got some upside there, at least some unknown ability that you could cash in on.
Right, and he is an unknown, so that's an interesting guy. But this is kind of like a tryout situation for all three of those guys. And I know DeAnthony Thomas isn't an appealing option right now, but he did have a receiving touchdown last week, and he was I believe he was their 4th-round pick a few years ago. So yeah, that's kind of my take on that. Maybe a few more targets for Macklin. We're all hoping that maybe this means more for Kelce, but who knows?
I was going to ask, tell us what you're thinking with the other Chiefs offensive players. I mean, Macklin strung together a decent season. I mean, I think he's having the type of season we all expected, which is, yes, he is the number 1 receiver, but it's not exactly a pass-heavy team.
I was actually a little lower on him, and he's really impressed me. So I think he could end up with 12 or 1,300 yards now. He was kind of on that pace already, but this kind of secures that. I think Kelce will get more targets, though. Like, I don't see how they wouldn't use him more.
Russell, we have been through this before, my friend.
You like how I just talked myself into that in like 10 seconds?
You're not alone. We all have, okay? We all have been Travis Kelce truthers, to borrow a term in the fantasy community. But Andy Reid, in perhaps his ultimate troll job, just does not do it. And it's just super frustrating. So far, Kelce, 24 receptions, 328 yards, and 2 touchdowns through 5 games. So, look, if you extrapolate that, it's about 75 for 1,000 and 6 touchdowns, which – again, for a tight end, it's a good season, but there's so much more. Like, there's so much untapped potential. It's just super frustrating. But, okay, so what, bottom line, Russ, what does this injury do to Macklin and Kelce? Are they up a little bit then?
Yes, I'm definitely bumping them up. I mean, Kelce was already the tight end too. Jimmy Graham, he needs to pull a James Jones and go back to New Orleans, or it's pretty much it's bad news. But yeah, I'm bumping both of them up in redraft for sure. Macklin is maybe like a high-end wide receiver 2 now, maybe even a low-end wide receiver 1.
Whoa, Russ. Hot take alert. Okay. We haven't had one in a while, but that qualifies. So everyone watch out. Watch out. All right. So I think we've covered the Chiefs pretty well. Another injury, minor, but still I think could be, have some lingering effect. You've got Tyrod Taylor in Buffalo. Again, putting together a nice little season under the radar. Sprained his MCL, though, in week 5. Expected to miss week 6. What's the politically correct term? I don't want to say forgettable. Oh gosh, what will I call it? The meh option, EJ Manuel, who, by the way, I mean, I think it's kind of funny. Buffalo probably regrets trading Matt Castle now, but I digress.
We could have just subbed you into the Democratic debates there with that politically correct usage.
I really tried. I really did. But yeah, so you've got EJ Manuel starting for week 6. Look, it seems like half the Buffalo offense was injured anyway. Sammy Watkins missed last week. LaShawn McCoy's been out a couple weeks. Carlos Williams, who was supposed to take over long-term for McCoy, he was out last week. So really this falls in line with Buffalo's season so far. So I guess my question is, Russ, is there anything to see here in Buffalo with Tyrod Taylor out this week?
Hard avoid on any of those players. I mean, someone might have a random long touchdown or something. Charles Clay is okay for dump offs, but all we've seen from EJ Manuel is sort of an inaccurate passer. So yeah, I'm out.
The only option offensively I think would be Clay, who again, 22 receptions, 262 yards, and 2 touchdowns through 5 weeks. So not bad. But we saw a little bit of the effect last week with Taylor not being fully healthy. Clay with only I believe 1 catch for 7 yards. So
if Carlos Williams does play this week, he could be an interesting, those random times where a player gets 30 carries and you're like, how does that even happen? Because the only way they're really going to be able to move the ball is by running it. So if he's good to go, I'd imagine they ride him and see if they can get a win. But
but this is just a train wreck, I think, all the way around.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. So, all right. So let's round out news and notes, Russ, with some players that are banged up a little bit. You got TJ Yeldon, groin injury. He expects to play this week, but it's possible he doesn't. Justin Forsett with an ankle injury, sat out overtime this past week. Also probably going to play this week. So do those injuries do anything for you, Russ, or are those guys still full go for you?
Kind of a bummer for Yeldon. He's really starting to get it going. I love that Jaguars offense right now. I mean, I wouldn't say love, but it's doing well. Like, they played well. They beat up on a bad defense. So
look, they did what they were supposed to do. They did what they were supposed to do.
That's the best thing I've seen them do since
ever,
like 2008, maybe.
Oh, I thought you were gonna bust out the Mark Brunell days, but
yeah,
those were good times. With Yeldon, I don't know, man. I'm a little disappointed personally. Even before the groin injury, obviously he's one of the few workhorse backs in the league, which has its benefits, but only 3.6 yards a carry so far. And like you said, you can't deny the rest of the offense seems to be gaining some momentum. You've got Bortles, who turned in a couple good performances. His receivers are showing up. You've got Julius Thomas coming back. I don't know. I want that half more yard per carry from Yeldon. I don't want him to just be a plotter,
Right. I mean, his running has been below average. I wouldn't deny that. But his usage in the pass game has been intriguing to me. And I think if his role is going to grow, it looks like they're going to feature him. So I like that in terms of fantasy value.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point, meaning if the offense is going to start clicking, it's good for him to get in now, sort of on the ground, on the ground floor before it really takes off. Because you're right. Look, if the passing game starts going, that's going to open up some lanes for Yeldon. So,
and in PPR, you can't really survive as a running back if you're not involved in the pass game. So the idea that they're going to give him sort of 2 to 3 to 5 receptions a game sort of bumps him up instantly,
Yeah, I agree with that. Justin Forsett, he's doing what he usually does, 4.5 yards a carry, which is right on line. Does his injury do anything? Are you looking at anyone behind him this week?
The options behind him haven't looked great. Taliaferro is a nice goal line back if he's out, but yeah, Buck Allen hasn't looked good, so I'm probably fading them if he's out. But last week was really, really a good thing for Forsett, because through the first 4 or so games, I was kind of worried that he was a one-year wonder, but he really put together a nice performance.
Yeah, and luckily, seemingly in spite of the offense around him.
Yeah.
Which really surprised me, because I was really in the Trestman boat thinking, he's got a little bit of that quarterback whisper in him, and he's going to do wonders with Joe Flacco, and like Brashad Perryman is going to be, Torrey Smith 2.0, and Max Williams is going to be the next Gronk, and blah, blah, blah. But it has just not materialized in the passing game. But luckily, Forsett has salvaged his value, I think.
It's a case where they need that deep threat so badly right now, and they just don't have it.
Right.
Perriman's still out, so their offense is suffering without that.
Yeah. So luckily, and look, and we could touch on this a little bit later with the buy low, but a guy like Perriman could be perfect guy for that. He's undoubtedly on waivers and redraft leagues. So, if he's available, and you've got an extra roster spot mid-season, I say go for it. So,
because they're literally just going to plug him in as soon as he's ready, because they need him They need Joe Flacco to just start tossing up those deep balls that he always throws.
Well, that, and I think we can all agree, Kamara Aiken, probably not the solution. So
probably not
which, oh well. All right, so that covers this week's news and notes. So with that said, Russ, let's get into some guys that have filled in for guys that maybe got injured earlier in the season that have been given that chance. And let's look at a couple things. How much longer they have staying fantasy relevant, and what's going to happen when the guy they replaced essentially comes back. Okay, so the first guy I want to talk about, which I'm very excited about, Thomas Rawls, Seattle running back, replaced Marshawn Lynch the last couple of weeks. He's got 200-yard games over the last 3 weeks. They felt confident enough to get rid of Robert Turbin earlier in the year. They traded away Kristen Michael. They signed Fred Jackson, yes, but he got hurt immediately, and they seemingly handed the keys over to Rawls. So let's say this. Let's ask this first, Russ. And this will be like hot take opportunity galore. So just get ready. Without Marshawn Lynch, just Thomas Rawls at running back, where do you put him fantasy-wise?
So Lynch is out for the rest of the season?
Well, let's just say
hypothetical.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. No Marshawn Lynch. It's Thomas Rawls' show. Where are you putting him?
Man, I think I need another week because he's been fantastic. I really can't say anything other than that. What's really different than what Dion Lewis has done in New England, basically when Dion Lewis went to New England, they cleared the path for him because they saw how good he was performing in training camp and preseason. And Seattle did the same thing with Rawls. Like you just mentioned, Turbin's gone, Kristen Michael's traded. And they basically gave him the feature role last week. So I'm impressed. I need another week before I can make any hot takey type of proclamation.
Before we lock you into that hot
but yeah, I'm really impressed. If he's on any waiver wires, definitely worth an ad.
Yeah, I look, for a couple reasons. I think he's got some value by himself. And look, Marshawn Lynch, it's sad to say, I think the age may be finally catching up with him, which we didn't think it would. So, all right, so let's say, Russ, Marshawn Lynch is supposed to come back this week, and let's just assume Lynch is healthy the rest of the way. How do you see that dynamic working out with Seattle between Rawls and Lynch?
Again, I'm a big fan of spelling even feature running backs, so I think he's shown that you can give him 5 to 10 carries a game and he's going to be effective. So I don't know, even if Lynch comes back strong, I don't see why you wouldn't give him a few drives or something like that,
Yeah, to your point, I don't see why not. If anything, I think Rawls has proved he could be a decent change of pace back.
Right.
Lynch can assume the first and second down duties, but look, Rawls last week, 23 carries for 169 yards.
Yeah.
For a 7.3 yards per attempt.
Yeah.
That's pretty decent. 2 weeks before that, in Chicago, 16 carries, 104 yards for 6.5 yard per carry average. So, look, I like him a lot. If he's still on your waiver wire, I would go out and get him. Here's a hot take opportunity, Russ. Let's assume Rawls and Chick-fil-A West, for sure, are on the waiver wire. Who are you claiming first?
Rawls.
Really? So even though West might have the upper hand on a starting gig the rest of the way.
Yeah, I think West is kind of boxed in, just based on the way I don't like the way the Chiefs are sort of built. And I think I'm worried about DeAnthony Thomas, as I mentioned before. So yeah, I don't see the actual upside with West.
Okay. Good. No, I think I might agree with you there. I think Rawls has shown something, or at least enough to earn some more playing time. So you heard it here first. Russell Clay claims Thomas Rawls will win you your fantasy league.
Somehow you sneaked me into a Thomas Rawls hot take.
There you go. See. All right. Let's cover some tight ends real quick. We've got Derek Carrier, who is, started the season third on the Washington Redskin depth chart behind Jordan Reed and Niles Paul. Obviously, Niles Paul out for the year. Jordan Reed had his usual concussion, which, it's not funny, but it's just kind of sad that keeps happening. So you throw Derek Carrier out there. His first start, 2 catches, 27 yards, but did have a touchdown. Maybe good for some streaming purposes. Where are you putting Carrier? Let's do the same thing we did with Rawls. So let's assume Jordan Reed out for the season. Where does that put Carrier for you, Russ?
So far this year, this Washington passing game is high floor city.
Right.
Pierre Garcon's been like six catches for 60 yards every week. So he's getting you like 12. And then Jamison Crowder's leading all rookies in receptions. I don't see why Carrier couldn't sort of build into a little role here while Reed is out, but I'm not too excited about him.
Yeah. And I don't think I blame you. I mean, look, even though he may be the starting tight end, he's still going to be well behind in targets, I think. Like you said, you've got Garcon there. You're going to get Deshaun Jackson soon,
right?
Any week. I think people should look. It's not a bad opportunity because, like we've seen, Jordan Reed and Niles Paul have done good things with it. But look, you're getting down to third string, and let's face it, there's a reason why guys are third string. So I don't think you can put too much stock in that. So again, it could be a nice streaming option, but other than that, I think you're safe to avoid.
If you're really desperate in a deep league, then yes. But otherwise, there's going to be other options on the waiver wire for you.
Right. So like it's Sunday morning, you forgot that Greg Olson's on a bye, and you need somebody. And hey, look, that guy's starting at least. So there you go.
If Eric Ebron and Austin Seferian-Jenkins are both hurt and they're your only tight ends,
then go nuts. But until otherwise, please refrain. All right, so let's move on to a tight end that I think you and I, Russ, are both way more optimistic about. That would be the unforgettable Gary Barnidge. Had 8 catches last week for 139 yards and a touchdown.
Good grief.
He's had a touchdown the last 3 weeks, and he hasn't had less than 6 catches for 75 yards. So I don't know, Russ, tight end too? Like overall? That's what I'm thinking.
So I'm big into the 4th and 5th year breakouts when they happen every once in a while for like highly drafted players. Well, Gary Barnidge is in his 8th year and he's 30 and he was not a high draft pick.
He was not.
I completely ignored the first 2 weeks of sort of really nice production. Just because it was Gary Barnidge. But after this, and for those of you that didn't see his tumbling catch where he pinned it on his legs, he looked like a child at gym class who didn't want to participate. But I'm buying it. I'm in. Like I don't understand this Browns offense whatsoever. Travis Benjamin, I'm kind of in. Like for this year, I don't like any of them for Dynasty, but for redraft, we kind of have to start respecting the weekly floor here,
I'm with you, man. Like I think he's a tight end 1. He's a starting tight end. He's on a team that's going to be throwing a lot.
Yeah, a lot.
And for some reason, Cleveland seems to be like tight end heaven for a lot of guys. Look at what Jordan Cameron did. So whatever, like I'm throwing my hands up and I'm taking it. Okay.
Week 5 and we're already here.
And look, why not, man? Look, it's obvious that Gary Barnidge has earned the trust way more out of the Cleveland coaches than Kelsey did out of Kansas City. And it doesn't make sense, and it's not right, but it's the reality that we live in.
It's happening.
It's happening. It is happening. So I'm all for it. I think and this will be a hot take, maybe the hottest take of all takes. I think there's a good chance Gary Barnidge ends up as the tight end 2 at the end of the season. Watch me. Hot take. You're speechless. I know, right? I know.
I
know.
It's all right. That's too far for me. But but you know what? Like,
who else is catching balls there, Russ? Who? Don't tell me Travis Benjamin. He only catches 2 a game, and they're each for 75 yards, but it's only 2.
Why wouldn't he be a tight end 1, like, going forward? He has to.
I'm saying he's a tight end 1.
I know.
Right. I'm saying he's going to finish as the second best tight end behind Gronk. That's what I'm telling you.
I'm saying I'm rationalizing this, and after 3 weeks of this, it's kind of like the same thing with Devonta Freeman. You just have to give them credit. You know what I mean? Like 1 year or 1 week, you can call it a fluke. 2 weeks, you can say, okay, well, whatever. But 3 weeks in a row, it's not a fluke anymore. You know, it's happening every week. So,
and look, it's the stars have aligned for Gary Barnidge. I don't know what to tell you. Okay, I'm sorry. There are no other options there. There just are no other options. Okay, look, 6 for 105 and a touch, 6 for 75 and a touch, 8 for 139 and a touch.
I know.
And don't get me wrong, it wasn't against good defenses. It was Oakland, San Diego, and Baltimore. But again, I don't know, man. That's just watch out. Okay, that's all I'm saying.
And we live in a world where Josh McCown got 40 DraftKings.
It's still around. Right, it's still around. So
killing it.
Actually, nice segue, Russ. With millions being won each week, as you just alluded to, every play in every game, including those to Gary Barnidge, could take you closer to a life-changing payday. This isn't fantasy as usual. It's DraftKings. Welcome to the big time, and hurry over to DraftKings.com. Use the PFF code to play for free with your first deposit in this Sunday's $1 million fantasy football contest. First place takes home $100,000. That's PFF for a free entry now at DraftKings.com. So, and I guarantee you, and we'll get to this a little later, Gary Barnidge, super cheap. So go for it.
Hold on. You know how Gronk sponsors DraftKings and he always does those like commercials and stuff? Right. We should get Gary Barnidge to sponsor the Fantasy Slant.
We should. And look, I'll say it here now. And I'm not going to claim to be the first, but I'm saying it now. Gary Barnidge, your tight end number 2 overall. I'm just saying, okay? Look, and if he has another 100-yard game, like, I might get the jersey. Who knows? I don't know what we're going to do. All right, Russ. So I don't want to say, we've covered the high points, and now we're going to go down into the valley. But let's talk quickly some buy low guys. Maybe some studs that have not had quite the best season so far. But all that means is you can get them for relatively cheap. So I will let you take this one. Reel off some guys that you should be targeting in your redraft leagues this week.
So in terms of buying low on, you're saying?
Yeah, let's start out with some guys that, maybe have not done what we thought they were going to do, but that just means that, hey, they can be had for super cheap.
I'm looking at Eddie Lacy, Alshon Jeffrey too. I think those are 2 guys that are sort of – Eddie Lacy's sort of been stifled so far this year. I don't totally understand why. I know he has an injury of some sort, but it's not keeping him out. So I think eventually the touchdowns are going to come, and eventually he's going to get some big plays. So I'm not as worried about him as most, and I would be willing to buy for cheap. Alshon's coming back. So, yeah.
Well, and to your point, I mean, with Eddie Lacy, I think this is a classic case of his value not being commensurate with his draft position, right? So, I know in a redraft league I was in, I drafted him 3rd overall. And look, has he produced like the 3rd overall pick? No, but he's still, having decent value. So through 5 games this year, 250 yards rushing, not much, believe me, 4.1 yards a carry and a touchdown. So the cumulative numbers are not good, But to me, the fact that he's still getting 4.1 yards a carry and he only has 63 attempts through 5 games, to me, that's more about usage than, drop off and skill level.
He's still the starting running back for the Green Bay Packers. Teams still have to throw almost all their emphasis on the passing game. So it's just a prime situation, you know what I mean?
Right.
So some of these are going to break his way eventually.
Yeah, and I think, look, obviously the Packers have done well despite his lack of production on the ground. But there will come a time when I'm not going to say a team's shutting down Aaron Rodgers because I don't know that you can do that. But they may turn to Eddie Lacy and just grind it out and kill some clock and win that way. And when they do, look, he's still going to perform very well. So I think Lacy is definitely a guy that you could target. That, look, he's still a running back one. You can't deny that. He's still in a good offense. The talent's still there. I say go for it. So Alshon Jeffrey, man, that's just a sad case, man.
The Bears are just a sad case.
Well,
other than Matt Forte,
they're on a 2-game winning streak, so be careful, okay? But yeah,
highly respectable season for Matt Forte so far.
Yeah, you can't kill Matt Forte off. I mean, look, I think I mentioned this before. I did an article earlier in the offseason about the running back cliff and how age 29 typically seems to be that age where there's a big drop off. And you had guys like Lynch, you had guys like Foster, and sure enough, those guys get hurt and they're out for a few weeks. But there's old Matt Forte just chugging along. I mean, it's really amazing when you think about it, what he's been able to do for as long and as well as he has. So, and look, that could even be a guy that I'm not going to say he's under the radar, but could be a guy that, while he's not getting headlines, is still a pretty good producer.
One of the more impressive feats in sports is sort of these running backs that can take the feature back carries for over 10 years, 8 to 10 years of feature back carries is just crazy. If those guys are still around after that, super impressive.
Right. So I think we agree on Forte. And it's hard to say. You can't really, compare Jeffrey's production, obviously, because he hasn't stepped foot on the field. But, would he be a guy you'd start targeting, or is it one of those, hey, lost causes for the season, and the whole situation's just too toxic for you?
If he's in, they're going to give him a lot of targets. So just based on volume, I like him. And he's a really talented player. So if he can sort of get over this injury right now in any way, he's going to be a really nice player in the second half of the year. So you're not necessarily buying him for now. You're buying him for weeks 10 through 16,
Yeah, and I would be really curious. And, the folks can feel free to tweet us. I'm at Dodger Moore. For the Dodgers, who quite possibly could be eliminated tonight, but that's a different sport. And then, or at Russell J. Clay. I'd be curious to see how many teams or how many leagues have Jeffrey like on the waivers. You know what I mean? Like how many teams have already cut bait and cut him loose in order to get just a body in there? I don't think it's a lot, but I also wouldn't be that surprised. We're at week 5 and look, things are starting to get desperate for a lot of people.
There's a lot of overreaction out there. A lot of people jumping very quickly off and on to players. I like to stay calm and go with a lot of my sort of before the season stances until I have to change. But I think everyone just has to stay calm,
Yeah, I think, and believe me, if he can be had for cheap in your league, I would say go get him. I really would.
Right.
As you alluded to, he's going to get a lot of targets. By comparison, Marcus Wilson, who has filled in the last couple of weeks, 6 catches, 80 yards 2 weeks ago, 6 catches, 85 yards, and a touchdown last week. So that's, I think that's the absolute floor for Jeffrey when he actually does come back.
Right.
So, okay. Who else, Russ, do you have either on the buy low or the sell high side?
Okay, so this is where Dynasty really differs from redraft. Sammy Watkins and Jeremy Hill, I think are great dynasty buys right now because they basically demoralize their owners through the first 5 weeks, and
they did a great job of it too.
and all signs are just pointing down. So even savvy owners are going to be willing to part ways with them. I don't think these first 5 weeks or this sample size defines their talent level. I think things will get better eventually, but it might not be this year. Right. So these guys, if you can get anything for them right now, I'm hopping off. There's just too many good players in that Bengals offense for Hill to have consistent production, you know?
Seemingly. So on that note, Russ, nice segue. Let's just talk the bigger question. Is this Bengals thing for real?
Yes.
And by Bengals thing, I mean Andy Dalton. Because I don't believe it.
No. Okay. I was thinking about it this week. Andy Dalton, it's like if the quarterbacks in the NFL are the driver and the offense is the car, like what kind of car would this Bengals offense be right now?
Right now, apparently it's
like a DeLorean.
Yeah.
What is he like? He's not asked to do much. He's looked good, but I mean, throwing to AJ Green is a pretty easy job. Throwing to Tyler Eifert is a pretty easy job.
Well,
dumping it off to Gio Bernard is a pretty darn easy job, you know? So,
yeah,
and even Marvin Jones is really a really good player. So,
well, and to your point, and I think you make a good point. You've got a lot of playmakers on that team. You just do. Look, Tyler Eifert finally, I think, is realizing the potential we all saw in him a couple years ago. Gio Bernard is one of the better pass-catching backs in the league. And, oh, by the way, you've still got A.J. Green doing his thing out there. So, no, I can get on board with that. I mean, I think the big thing in that offense, and you sort of touched on it, meaning there's not a whole lot to do. Really, the only thing to do is not turn the ball over, right?
Right.
That's the big thing. And if you can avoid that, look, you're going to have the ball, obviously, a lot longer. So far, 2 interceptions for Dalton this year in 5 games.
Well, I think, okay, so 2014, I think people way overreacted to that because all his weapons were gone. Sure. All there was Jeremy Hill and a beat-up Giovanni Bernard.
Right.
And now everyone's back, so it's somewhere in between, you know? He's like a little above average for starting.
So that actually, that in my mind, piques my interest because you mentioned all the injuries last year to the Bengals. You know, the playmakers, Green, Eifert. So that's when Jeremy Hill sort of ascended, right? Mm-hmm. When they literally had no one else and they were just pounding the ball.
Right.
So I guess the fun question, the hot take opportunity for you, Russ, long term, are you buying more into the Bengals passing game or running game? And by long term, I mean sort of more dynasty, not the rest of this season. The rest of this season, I think, is pretty apparent what they're going to do, and it's working. But dynasty, are you going to be putting your stock more in, you know, the passing game and all that entails, or the running game and essentially trying to trade off what they did last year?
It's not even really a knock on Jeremy Hill that I like Tyler Eifert more than him at their positions, you know? Mm-hmm. And it's not a knock that I like AJ Green more at his position than I like Jeremy Hill. So he's going to be a situational back. That's kind of a problem. And Gio Bernard has really capped his sort of receptions and all that. But they're going to get him going eventually. Like, they know they have a really talented player in Hill. So he's going to have his games. It might be inconsistent, but I'm still buying him long term, at least as a running back too.
Okay. And I think that's fair. I mean, look, running back 2, that's fairly conservative. You're not asking a whole lot from that spot on your roster. So if you can get a starting running back that's at least going to be the first and second down guy, I think that's all you can ask for. So, All right. So, Russ, let's now conclude this episode with what is quickly becoming I think, my favorite part of the podcast, and that's going to be our DraftKings value plays for this week. As we mentioned early in the show, if you followed our advice last week, you did pretty well. So Dion Lewis, Todd Gurley, Antonio Gates, all with solid weeks. They're always going to be out there, those value plays, and you're always going to need them. So let's get right to it, Russ. Who's your first DraftKings value for this week?
So I mentioned this earlier, Jamison Crowder. As long as Deshaun Jackson is out, he's going to get targets, and he's still really cheap again this week. He's had over 12 DraftKings points every week over the last 3 weeks. So I really like him as a cash game play. He doesn't have a high ceiling, but who knows? Maybe if he gets a touchdown too, we could get into the low 20s. But if Deshaun's back, that's something you got to watch. So if Deshaun does play, don't play him. But if he doesn't, look for Crowder to get 8 to 10 targets again.
Okay. Yeah, and look, I think we can all agree you will need to find a value at receiver every single week. Just because, look, there's 3 spots, and typically, at least for me, I know I typically use my flex on another receiver. And as much as we would love to put in Odell Beckham, Antonio Brown, Calvin Johnson, and Demaryius Thomas in there, it ain't going to happen. So you need to find those guys that are at the bottom of the barrel salary-wise, but still have a pretty good shot at making some points.
Right.
So, I'm going to go – we just talked about this, but I don't understand it, but whatever. Andy Dalton, the 14th most expensive quarterback, but the second highest scoring, according to DraftKings scoring. So, why not, man? Keep riding that train until it runs out.
And he just played a great game against the Seahawks, so I don't understand that price at all. He's the number 1 fantasy quarterback right now, right?
Fantasy wise, yeah. I mean, depending on some tweaks in scoring in different leagues, yeah, he's up there.
Oh, so
for sure.
First or second in scoring, but I love him in all formats. Yeah,
that price is very hard to beat. So. All right, so let's talk about another guy we just got done mentioning, Russ. Eddie Lacy. He's the 8th most expensive running back on DraftKings this week. He only has averaged 9 fantasy points per game. Is this the week you finally buy Lacy, or maybe finally buy back Lacy, or are you still avoiding?
I wouldn't play him in a cash game at all. But he's kind of intriguing in a tournament. Like I said, one of these weeks I feel like he's going to start to get the ball rolling here.
Right.
Hopefully not in a fumble, but
Hopefully.
I think he'll turn it around one of these next few weeks. So maybe if you're making quite a few tournament lineups, throw him in there as sort of a contrarian play.
Yeah, and actually, that's an excellent point.
Nobody's going to be on him. He's going to be really low.
Right. Well, no, but the point you made is a good one, which is, part of playing games like DraftKings, whether it's DraftKings or FanDuel, especially like you said in the tournament plays, is identifying those guys that, hopefully no one else is picking, so that if they do well, you're the only one that is reaping that benefit. And I think you're spot on with that. Eddie Lacy's not making a lot of noise, which means he's not going to be a very popular pick on DraftKings lineups this weekend. So, look, he's still a little pricey, but again, I think if any position you could afford it, you can do running back, and he's definitely a guy that will not be popular in DraftKings lineups. So, all right. You know what? Let's finally get to this. Antonio Gates. Herculean effort last night. 9 catches, 92 yards, 2 touchdowns, 30 DraftKings points. Still checking in at 4,600 in DraftKings salary. I don't want to say it's automatic, Russ, because, look, you still got Gronk there, but you're literally getting Gronk-type production, at least potentially, for $3,000 less. I don't know how you can avoid Gates if you play more than one lineup in DraftKings.
Yeah, you can slide Gronk to your flex if you want to play him.
Yeah.
That's
not a bad idea either.
Right. The real story there is Keenan Allen. This is trouble. We were looking for that, and the targets are getting funneled to Antonio Gates again. So that's something to keep an eye on. If you can trade Keenan Allen for a high-end option right now, I would do it.
Yeah. 6 catches, 57 yards. Look, even the week before that, 4 catches for 72 yards, had a touchdown. But it's just one of those things, man. And I mentioned this in some article I wrote not that long ago. Allen is just so frustrating because, he could go off for 150 yards one week and then have, 30 yards the next. It's just, you never know. But with Gates, for DraftKings especially, yeah, that's going to be one of your better value plays, especially at a position where there's not many, I'm not going to say elite options because I really think there's only one, but when there's not that many good, consistent options at the position, Gates is about as consistent as it's going to get. And if he's still that cheap, I think that's an easy play, and you can devote some of the cash left over, the salary left over, to bigger and better plays. So
agreed.
All right. Well, Russ, we covered a lot of ground this week. Hopefully everyone takes our advice. It obviously helps and is a winner. So you heard it here first. We're guaranteeing that. Anyway, until next week, he's Russell Clay. I'm Michael Moore, and we will see you next time on the Fantasy Slant.